Today is 11th of February 2025, and annually this day is the commemoration of women and girls in science. It is known that women and girls in science in Nigeria and Africa are underrepresented, and that's because we do not have as much of them as we would want or are needed to be in sciences. Why do we have underrepresentation of women and girls in science? We're talking with someone who will speak to that today. She's a professor of law and technology, Leeds Beckett University, United Kingdom. Nnenna Ifeanyi-Ajufo is our guest, and she joins virtually. Good morning. Thank you for being a part of the show today.
Good morning, and thanks for having me. I'm delighted to join this very important conversation.
Okay, so you are a woman in science. I'll say kudos to you. It takes a whole lot for a woman to be in the field of science. This is the day where we celebrate people like you, and we'll encourage more women to become one when we talk about women in science. So, I'm not alone in the studio. I have two gentlemen with me who are my co-hosts. Dr. Idahosa Osamhanze is here, as well as Oyinpreye Krumale. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning to you, and welcome.
Let's hit the conversation. So, women and girls in science, this day is set aside to celebrate them and to look at how they advance development. What role do they play? Since you've been a woman in science, what can you say is your experience, and what are those things you think hinder more female participation in sciences?
Thank you very much. And I would say that this year's celebration is actually very peculiar because it's 10 years since the United Nations passed the resolution making 11th February the day for celebrating women and girls in science. And I want to also contextualize in approaching the question that, when you say science, women in science, people would usually just think about the sciences, but then it goes to STEM. So you think of technology, you think of science, you think of the education, you think of the career, you think of inclusion. In talking of my experience, I'm sure it's very obvious, particularly because of where we come from, being Nigerians, being Africans, that, the science field is generally male-dominated. It may not always be the case when you look at it holistically, but then it is also that presumption that is what it is. And so when you find yourself in that field, there are notions of patriarchy, which is undeniable. You also find that it's usually a difficult terrain to navigate, to prove yourself. So it's like being a woman twice. When you find yourself in the science and technology field, you have to prove that you own that space. There is also the challenge in terms of access, inclusion. You will find that in places like Nigeria, when people choose educational path, even from childhood, you're geared towards a path that is away from maybe engineering, computer science. We just assume that these roles are for men, and that has not gone away. You also find that you're sort of in a constant competition to kind of show that you have earned your space. Sometimes you're not given a place because you deserve it. It's as if it comes from a place of compassion. Oh, we are just giving women a space. We are trying to support gender equality. Yet you see that many women are striving to own that space. We're seeing more women taking up that space. If you look at statistics too, for example, you will find that the representation of women is still poor. Even though generations are changing, there is more access to education. Statistics will still show you that, for example, in the AI field, there is only 20% of women. And sometimes they don't take the technical engineering role. They may take other roles that may be more administrative. So that has generally been my experience, but I foresee a future generation where things will be better.
Yeah, but looking at this year's theme, unpacking STEM careers, her voice in science, are there limitations, regulation-based limitations to women actually participating outside of these cultural inhibitions that you have mentioned?
No, you wouldn't see. We are in an age where regulation will not tell you that women can participate. Absolutely, it's impossible. But what we would rather look at it from a different perspective, how regulation may inherently be hindering. So if we look at it, let's look at it from policy, career policies, considering the theme for the year. Now, policies in career may make it stringent for women to participate in this field. For example, we think about maternity leave, Flexible working conditions. We know how it is with women having children. So if you have to be at work 9 to 5 or let's say 9 to 8 for certain kinds of jobs, those policies may inadvertently hinder women thriving in those professions. So you wouldn't see a regulation that would say women can't be in this field. But sometimes too, you have some kind of implied terms. Certain fields, for example, will not employ women. Their policies make it that way. For example, if women are pregnant, they can't work in certain fields. So it is the stereotype in terms of how policies are drafted that we may then say maybe it's regulatory, but regulation, of course, it will be discriminatory for any regulation to hinder women. Absolutely discriminatory. If you look at, for example, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 27, it tells you that everyone has the right to participate freely and enjoy the arts and share in scientific advancement and its benefits. So regulation, it will be difficult to find such a discriminative regulation, but the problem is the policies, the career policies, the workplace policies, the employment policies, even certain schools. There are certain courses that you may find implied policies that may make it difficult for girls. So it is those stereotypical implied policies that are in place across sectors that could actually reflect those regulatory imbalances or regulatory challenges.
Okay. Thank you very much. Now, I want us to make some form of comparisons between Nigeria here and Europe and other climes where you are currently based. Previously, in the political arena, there's this comparisons that in this our climb, women were bad, or that we need to create a special status or a special platform for them where they can attain to some levels politically. And but we see people like Condoleezza Rice of the United States of America. We see Kemi Badenoch at the moment, who is leading in parliament in the UK. And before that, we saw a lady there, a woman, I'm trying to recall her name, was the prime minister in the UK. It doesn't look like these people, policy-wise, were barred from attaining that status. I want to ask if we do not have same thing reflecting in the science, in the women aspect, in those climes and here in Nigeria, and with the comparative advantages and how we can adopt same over here.
Thank you. I think the answer is clear. It's gender equality and how societies look at gender equality. I'm sure you're referring to Margaret Thatcher. There have been other prime ministers as well who are women. But then think about the society when would a Nigerian, woman at this point be president. So you see, inequalities in other parts or global inequalities will always reflect inequalities in other parts. So the question is, how do we see gender equality in our society, before we then come to policies? Those ideas and hierarchies you see in terms of gender will reflect in policy issues. So while policy may somehow support, that's why I wanted to say earlier that it is difficult to remove culture from politics. You can't separate them. It is difficult to remove culture from policies. It would always influence. So what is different is the acceptance of gender equality and the roles that gender can play in those situations. I would not say that in Nigeria specifically there's that hindrance. We're seeing more female politicians. We're seeing more and more female politicians, people winning, and I think that the understanding is changing, and that's the role that awareness plays. Politics, I think, is being redefined in Nigeria. If you ask me, when you look at the previous election, you would see that more women are being voted in. So in terms of STEM, to bring it back to STEM, it is the same consciousness. I think there is more enlightenment. People are being more exposed. And, we are beginning to accept more of understanding of human rights. I think that is also playing a role in terms of that. We are seeing more women who are entering leadership positions. I wouldn't always look at it from a challenging perspective. I think things have changed in the past 10 years. So how policies are being defined, if you look at it in politics, it still ripples down to the STEM sector as well. So more women are entering politics, but at the same time, like the question you asked, but at the same time in STEM, we're seeing more and more women defying the challenges.
Let's look at women participation in STEM. So it is reported that women make about 34% of the STEM workforce. And when there's a test for women and men or girls and boys in STEM, the girls have as good as results as the guys would have, but they seem to have other choices because they're also good in other subjects, in other fields. What are those factors that you think influence the choice of study of girls? Now they have access to education, so it's about what course do I study? What other factors affect what they choose to study, if it's going to be engineering, maths, or it's going to be in the arts?
Thank you for alluding to that. That was exactly my point. When you said more girls are taking up the space and doing better. I think the main challenge is the lack of role models. That is one of the key challenges you see. There are girls who want to go into this sector, but then, there is a lack of role models in the field. If you go back to the schools, for example, I'm a lecturer, you'll find that it's also a male-dominated field. I always say that let's support more women to teach science. Let's support more women to teach technology. So in the first instance, you're being told from the house that, you should do this course as a girl, you should do nursing as a girl, even if you want to go into science, don't do engineering, it's so difficult. I'll give you an instance. 2 years ago, we traveled somewhere with women in a similar age group, and I have a friend, she's an engineer, she's an expatriate here, and someone asked her, a fellow lady asked her, why are you doing such a difficult job? So these are the kinds of reality you still see. So lack of role models, the lack of understanding that this is a field that women can go into, starting from the home. Your parents are not encouraging you to go into that field. You also don't see people like you teaching those fields. You also see that there are biases against women pursuing a career in that field. The kinds of learning material, perhaps the conditions for learning. Sometimes we don't diversify education. Maybe to learn a particular subject like engineering, it would be so scary for a girl to venture into the practical aspects of it. So we also need to diversify learning materials. We also need to diversify the kinds of teaching. Also, access is another issue. We have to think about the rural areas. We have to also think about the background in terms of learning. Now, a person who has studied in Lagos may not have a person who is studying in somewhere far away, let's say Imo State, may not have the same access as someone who is in Lagos in terms of infrastructure, in terms of technology, and the sort of technology they are being used to teach. So that could also be a challenge in terms of the future and what they want to aspire to. So we have to think about bridging the gap in terms of learning access, in terms of diversifying education, and understanding what inclusive education means at all levels across the country.
Yes, ma, you have also made a point that's just so valid, that is where you see women discouraging another woman from taking on a certain career. And even in the political arena, that argument has also been there, that the real reason why women are not getting up there is because their fellow women will not support them, that it's more like women against women than men against women. Is there anything that is also being put in place to really enlighten and educate women to actually help other women to climb up?
I think this is one of them. This is the education. I'm so excited that a man is actually saying this. So it's that conscious awareness. Now, I always say to people that most times when we talk about patriarchy, gender exclusion, we always see men as the culprit. Sometimes it's even the women. It's even the women, and it stems from, some kind of very competitive, you've had a space, you don't want other women to have the same space, you want it to be dominated in a certain way. I think it's a conscious, you wouldn't say that the system in itself is saying that, yes, we have to educate in this way. It's a conscious raising of awareness, and that is where mentorship comes in. I think if we can begin to think of mentoring young women, we see our role as that of a mentor, then we begin to understand that leadership role in enhancing a new generation. Again, it is culturally imbibed stereotypes that you see. So sometimes I don't blame a mother, for example, who is telling a child, you can't do this, because that is how we see society. The first ambition is you need to get married. Those things still exist. No mother wants to imagine, oh, my daughter is not married at a certain age. So it's a public education strategy. Our governments have to think about public education. I was listening to the earlier segment. Someone made a valid point that we mustn't always think of the government and, states. We should also think of the local governments. That's one of it. But we also have to take on a responsibility of education as individuals. Both the girls, both women and girls have to see a responsibility for educating themselves first. But also, you will think of various avenues like this: journalists, the schools, the churches, the mosque, all kinds of educational avenues to enhance awareness and raise education that this field is not just about men. The other thing will be skills development. If you ask me, when we develop skills across generations, we'll begin to understand the value of having all levels of women or having different generations of women. The other way for awareness is networking. I would always say networking can be anywhere. It could be even in the church, it could be in the marketplace. So those kinds of things can be put in place even in the marketplaces to encourage women to raise awareness. And that is just the answer: raising awareness and the government understanding the role of STEM. STEM awareness is not just about curriculum. Oh, we've created computer science in school. Oh, we've created mathematics in school. We've created engineering in school. Let's think about the public. Charity begins at home. Beyond just creating the curriculum and saying we are, registering, we are giving admission to women, let's also think about how to enhance knowledge, how to enlighten society, how to enlighten parents on the value of encouraging women in these fields.
For you, looking at it from motivation and from the model part that you spoke from, you are a lawyer, you are a professor, and you are also in the field of technology. How did you come about this? And how do you think that girls who are growing up, most especially in their secondary school, what do you think they can do, like you did, to come to this enviable pedestal and serve as a model for the younger generation?
Interestingly, my story is a very interesting one. And so when I hear people talking about scrapping NYSC sometimes, I laugh because NYSC was a blessing, for me. So when I had finished law school, I was posted to a law firm and, it just wasn't all going well. And I served with MTEL. It's sad to see that MTEL does not exist anymore. And it was mentorship that changed it for me. There was a gentleman who was heading the legal sector then in Abuja. And then I saw I had just studied contract, I had studied commercial law, but here I was seeing law being applied in telecommunications. And that was a change for me. I wanted more. I was like the only female in the whole of the department then. But I wanted more, and then I went on to study a master's in information technology law. I remember a Nigerian who was a fellow student telling me, "What are you doing? This is not going to mean anything for you." At that time, I was saying people should have access to the internet. He said, when people are having malaria in Nigeria, this was in the UK, and a Nigerian was telling me, people have not eaten 3 times a day, and you're saying people should have access to technology. And that was years back, 2007, and now we're saying that access to technology should be a right. But what changed it for me, I had supportive parents. I have a father who doesn't believe that you have to have a male child for things to change. And this is just the message adding to what the question that was asked earlier about awareness. And I pursued that. But then, believe it or not, most of the opportunities I've had has been from, that's why I always say that I usually don't agree that men do not give women the space. I've seen people who have said, no, women need to take up this space. My role in the African Union, it was a man who said, no, we have to create a space for women to join in this. So again, you have men who now understand that let's create opportunities for women. Then from there, African Union, Global Forum on Cyber Expertise, maybe because it's a society where gender equality is supported as against what we see. But then if you look around, we're seeing more. I don't believe that gap is as it used to be before, but we need to do better. So I started teaching. There's been so many opportunities. But again, I must also add that it's not just about the society, hard work. And I'm saying this because perhaps many young women are watching. Hard work makes a distinction. It is difficult being a woman, trust me. You keep a home, you keep children, you have to work twice as hard. But it's also about individual interest. Do you want to make a change? Do you want to create a better future for yourself? Do you want to leave a mark as you go on? And I think the other part as well is the opportunities that have been given in the working environment. And I think this should change as well in Nigeria. We should create opportunities for women. You're sitting, there's a lady with you, there are 2 men. I'm excited that, there is that balance. Let's create more workspaces that understand this sort of balance. It would help as well with STEM. When I hear her speak, I'm not being biased, so it's interesting that we see all of this. And lastly, I must say mentorship again. Mentorship has helped me a lot, and I'm playing that role for other women, and I think that makes an absolute difference. When I say mentorship, it's not just women mentoring women, it's also men mentoring women, society, government understanding that they also can mentor women. Networking has also helped me, and I tell young girls, use social media tools out there positively. You don't just use social media because you want to post pictures. Let social media be a tool of education for you. There are platforms like LinkedIn where you can meet professionals, discuss professional issues. Social media shouldn't just be about love and fantasy and playing. Use it for educational purposes. There are so many materials online. If you have data, use it to better yourself. So many platforms for STEM, for science, for technology. If you're interested in social media, for example, let it also be for think about how can I be innovative in terms of social media. Can I create new platforms? I think that has also helped me in the field, and I want to see a new generation of young women taking advantage of such opportunities.
Okay, as the only woman amongst, in the midst of men here, I get the right to ask the last question. Okay, I just give myself that right.
You have the right.
Okay, so the question is this, quickly. Now, when there are empowerment programs for women, we tend to see that it's based on the old skills. It's hairdressing, it's fashion, it's makeup and all that. So now we're talking about science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. This can be done outside of the four walls of an institution. I've seen trainings where girls are learning how to be mechanics. Now, how do we encourage that type? What kind of partnership needs to happen so that there is a needs assessment, and then the girls are even coming to the table to say, this is what we would like to do. These are the skills we would like to learn. We have new generations, the Gen Zs and the Alphas. So skills for them has changed.
Absolutely. Earlier, I said we have to diversify education, and that was what I meant with that. We tend to have a very stringent approach to education in Nigeria, where you just have to go to school, you're in the university, it has to be this particular way. First of all, I think that learning activities need to change. We need to understand that learning is not just about being in the classroom and this is what you have to learn. There should be various approaches. Learning can actually be more focused on lifelong practical approaches. Are there ways that we can teach technology outside of the four walls of classroom? Yes. But then imagine telling your daughter to go and be a mechanic apprentice. You can't even, you don't want to think about it. But here in this part of the world, we have a system we call apprenticeship, where people don't necessarily go to the universities. So people would then take up an apprenticeship in a role where they want. We are seeing, for example, that there are policies saying people don't have to go to university to study certain fields. And that is actually the practical aspect. As a lawyer, for example, you find that when you come into practice, what you study may now change when you get into practice. Same with STEM. So I think we also need to think about that in the first instance. What practical approaches? How do we enhance authentic learning? Beyond the curriculum, can we create informal aspects? STEM must not just be formal education. If we go down to the rural communities where we don't have, for example, universities in certain areas, can we have, based on policies, arrange notions where technology education can be transferred in more informal ways? But importantly, if we don't create policies about this, it cannot be implemented. So first, we need to understand that we must first have policies, whether from the National Assembly, whether from the National Education Board. How do we want to understand education in the country? If you don't have a degree today, perhaps you will not be valuable in society. People will say, oh, he's not a graduate, he has no certificate. Oh, sometimes we create a strata between polytechnic. Those things must change. People should have the ability to be employed based on practical skills alone. If we cannot do that, then it will discourage people from pursuing informal education. Whether you're a plumber, whether you're a carpenter, you should be able to have a basic level of life. So the standard of living needs to also change for people to believe that I can study informally and still have a good life. People have certain skills technologically. There are young people that can build drones, build all kinds of things, but they are at home waiting for JAM for 5 years. They have no opportunity to implement those things. So let's think of sandboxes as well. Let government create innovative sandboxes that may give access to people, mentor young people, give them opportunity to create things without necessarily going to school. And let's also test practical skills in universities. It's not just about writing exams. We should also think about internship, create more internship and partnership, knowledge partnership, exchange partnership with firms, with companies, with tech companies. As you study in school, let your university have those sort of partnership with tech companies where they come in to teach, or even allow young people to do more internship with their firms. That way we can create more practical experiences outside the four walls of a classroom, like you put it.
Thank you so much, Nnenna Ifeanyi-Ajufo, who is Professor of Law and Technology, Leeds Beckett University, United Kingdom, for finding time to be part of the show today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.